In this video, we're going to demonstrate X-Plane 11's Autopilot. I've downloaded and installed the demo version of X-Plane. I'm not using a yoke, pedals, or joystick, leaving me to fly the plane with a mouse and keyboard. Flying with a mouse and keyboard can be done, but it's difficult to maintain smooth and level flight. If you're interested in trying X-Plane, you can download the demo for free, check it out, maybe without investing in flight controls. The built-in Autopilot can fly the plane for you, hands-free, and let you decide if X-Plane might be for you. Once we're airborne, I'm going to engage the Autopilot and control the plane's heading, its climb, and level flight. Then we'll fly around a bit. Later, we'll demonstrate the Autopilot's ability to fly a chosen route and automatically descend to a runway for a landing. You'll need to review the built-in Get Started videos to learn more about the controls, but you can follow along here knowing we're going to use the keyboard's letter B to toggle the brakes on and off, F2 to increase power, F1 to reduce power, 2 to lower the flaps a notch at a time, 1 to raise them. Clicking the mouse in the middle of the screen activates the mouse pointer for nose up, nose down, left and right. So I'll do that now. You can see the controls move up, down, side to side. If I click in here again, they no longer move and I can use the mouse to do other things here. Back to my script. The scroll wheel zooms in and out and does some other important things. This is demonstrating that. And before I take off, I'm going to adjust the heading bug on the heading indicator. This little orange pointer here is the heading bug. This knob can move it up, down, depending on which side of this knob you click the mouse on. And once I engage the Autopilot's heading, the plane is going to automatically fly to whatever direction this is pointing to. So if I leave it here and we take off and then I click heading, the plane's going to make a left turn maybe before I want it to. So before we take off, I'm going to adjust the heading bug and get it lined up with the runway's heading. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and release the brakes and get airborne, and then I'll engage the Autopilot after we get going. Release the brakes, add some power. I'm going to move the mouse a little bit to the right because the plane engine's torque pulls it to the left. So I'm going to try to stay straight on the runway until we get up to 60 knots or so, and then I'm going to raise the nose, and after we're in more or less steady flight, I'll engage the Autopilot. All right, I'm going to click away from here. To engage the Autopilot, I need to click the heading button twice, and now the plane is going to fly this heading. The climb rate is really extreme and the speed is coming down, so I'm going to click the VS button for vertical speed and reduce that to about 500 feet a minute here until we build up enough speed. I want to make sure we don't fly so slowly that the plane quits flying. Alright, so we're going along good enough. I'm going to raise the vertical speed to, says number 10, that's in hundreds of feet, so it's 1,000 feet per minute. This vertical speed indicator is pointing to 1,000 feet per minute. We're still heading in the same direction we started out, but as you can see, if we look around, we're off the ground and we are flying, and I'm not using the keyboard. I'm only using the mouse to scroll around, which I do by right-clicking somewhere in the screen and then moving the mouse. All right, I'm going to pause the video here for a moment. No, I'll bring up the map first and then we'll pause. So X-Plane 11 has a wonderful built-in map which you can activate, keeping an eye on the altitude. I don't want to get above 2,500 feet, but you can activate the map by clicking the letter M on the keyboard. I had it over here for a while. So there's the map. I'm going to make it a little bit larger here. And I'm going to use the mouse wheel to scroll in, zoom in. I can move the mouse around by right-clicking and dragging it as though it were a desktop icon. This light blue plane is us. I'm going to toggle the the map off one more time and check our level. We're getting to the altitude I want, so I'm going to click the ALT button for altitude on the autopilot, and you can see the nose is coming down. We're going to maintain approximately 2,500 feet of altitude. And while we're doing that, let's initiate a 90-degree turn to the left. I'm going to move the mouse pointer to the heading bug knob that controls it, and I'm going to move it about 90 degrees, and you can see the plane has begun turning. I'm not doing anything. The autopilot's taking care of this for us. I'm going to reduce the power a little bit. I'd like to maintain a speed of about 120 or 115 knots. No reason, I'm not an expert, it's just what I think would be appropriate for this flight. And we can come back to the map by pressing letter M, and you can see our direction of flight has changed. If I zoom in on the map, we can find the fixes, and I want to fly to enough of these fixes so that we can circle around, come back to the airport, and make a landing. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. Sounds like we're going kind of slow, so let me check that out. Oh, we are. So I'm going to increase the power. I lowered it too much. Come back to the map, and I'm going to make note of these fixes. We're going to fly to this fix first, VASHN, probably for Vashon Island, and then we'll fly to some others. Now I'm going to input this into the Garmin GPS navigator first, but before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and pause our flight by clicking letter P on the keyboard. You can see that it says paused up here, it's not going anywhere, and that'll give me some time to put in our flight plan, which we could have done before we took off, but I wanted to demonstrate taking off first. So this can be, I can click anywhere on the main screen here and bring this up as a 2D, larger, easier to manipulate window that I can move around with a mouse. And I'm going to let you know that there are two knobs on either side, an inner and an outer ring for both sides. This one controls the radios on this side. This one manages some things on these menu items here. So I'm going to start with clicking the FPL button for flight plan. There's already a flight plan in here. That isn't what we're going to be using, so I'm going to click on the menu, and I'm going to scroll the outside ring up until I get down to delete flight plan. Press enter. That flight plan is gone. I'm going to click the center of this inner knob to highlight this, and then I'm going to enter that fix that we saw just a few moments ago. And on the inner ring, I'm going to click my scroll wheel up one time. It brings up a new window, and it starts with letter K because most airports in the United States begin with the letter K. So we want to scroll up to the letter V, so I'm going to roll the mouse wheel up until I get to V. Then I'm going to move the pointer or the mouse over to the outer ring and scroll up one notch to move it over to the next letter. And it is an A, so that's where we want to be at. So I'm going to move it over one more time and go to S. I'm going to move the mouse back into the inner ring, click on S, outer, down to H. There's Vashon. It's in the northwest. This is the fix we want, so I'm going to enter it by clicking the ENT button, and I'm going to click the enter button one more time to accept it. So there's our there's our first fix that we're going to. I'm going to go back to the map, and I'm going to write down all the fixes that we want. For example, we'll go south here, probably to LANGL. Then we'll go over to JOSTA and up to JALON, and finally back to the airport. And we'll create an approach as well. I'm going to pause the video and take care of all that, and then I'll come back when I have the flight plan all entered. Okay, so while I was paused the flight, I chose some fixes and I entered them into the X-Plane's simulation of the Garmin GNS 530, which is really accurate. Okay, so the first fix we're going to go to is VASHN, then FAVDU. We're going to come down here to GIRTE, then to LANGL, over to JOSTA, JOSTA, just a minute, and then JALON, and the final one is the airport. So what I've done is I've created kind of a nice circle so we're not trying to make any 90-degree turns. I'm going to go ahead and minimize the map. I'll show you what the finalized flight plan looks like. So here's all our waypoints and the fix. When we get a little further along here in a few minutes, I'll add an approach, and I'll show you how we work that. In the meantime, I'm going to unpause the flight, and off we go. And as you might recall, we're still flying automatically at 2,500 feet at about 120 knots, and we're heading a little bit south of west. Now, I don't want to keep flying on the heading. I want to use the GPS navigation system that this plane has and fly to this fix. So I'm going to roll up so that this fix is highlighted, and I'm going to click the direct to button so there's no confusion. I'm going to activate that, and then I'm going to come down to the autopilot and I'm going to click nav. So the plane will navigate to that fix. It says we should be going at about 250 degrees as our desired track, and it looks like that's where we're going. I'm going to check on the map periodically, bring up the map, take it down, just to make sure we're aiming to the right place. Looks like we are, and the plane should start turning and come this way to FAVDU and then turn pretty soon. We can watch that out the window, and we can also watch it on the map if the autopilot's properly engaged. And it's not, because I didn't toggle the CDI to GPS. It's telling us there's going to be a left turn to 214 in this seconds countdown. So I believe them. I believe it said it's going to do that. I believe it's going to do that. And instead it turns to the right. Now hopefully it's going to pop back to the left. I will tell you that my opinion of the autopilot in the Cessna Skyhawk that comes as a default plane is the worst autopilot of all the planes that come with X-Plane 11, or the payware that you can buy it. It's really sketchy. But for our purposes today, it looks like it's working. I'll go back to the map. The next fix we're going to go to is FAVDU, and I'm going to speed things along here using the ground speed control key, which is holding down letter Alt on the keyboard and pressing letter T 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, and right before we get to the fix, I'm going to turn it back to normal time. So here we're going 4 speed. It's probably enough out of that. Give it a chance to make the turn, and the next turn, as you recall, is coming all the way down here to GIRTE. So if it makes this turn, which I hope it will, like I said, it's kind of a clunky autopilot. It says it's going to make a left turn in 6 seconds. That'd be awesome. But it turns to the right first. There's some that are very snappy autopilots in these planes, and this plane's flying so slow compared to some other high performance airplanes. You would think that it would snap better, but look at that. We missed FAVDU completely. I'm going to see if I can force that to work. Maybe we'll just go to that. Don't have any idea why it would turn to the right, because it's down here. Am I going to have to do this video over again? I hope not. Although I will say, I don't have a joystick, yoke, or pedals, and I am flying the plane automatically with just a keyboard and mouse. I could probably do better with the mouse, actually. This is starting to get on my nerves here. My bad, I forgot. The navigation button needs to be clicked twice to bring up these 4 little letters in the window, which are GPSS, GPS steering. I didn't have that toggled. I needed to click this twice. My apologies to the viewers, if you're still here. Pressing letter W will take us back to kind of a default window of the cockpit. Let's look at the map and see where we're going. Oh, look, it looks like that the plane is actually handing to G-right. I take back those horrible things I said about this autopilot. Pardon me. I'm going to go speed up until we get down there. Slow down a little bit, let the plane at least get aimed towards that thing. That fix, it's not a thing, sorry. Maybe 16 speed is too much. So I'm going to press it twice and go back to normal speed. And hopefully it'll toggle to the next fix, which is LANGL. And that's this one down here. I'm going to go ahead and program the GPS navigation system for our approach, and this is how we do that. So I'm going to roll the cursor down to Seattle, so that's what's highlighted. I'm going to click the PROC button for procedure, and I'm going to select an approach. The approach that I want to use is ILS 34 left. That's the runway I want to land on, 34 left at Seattle, and I want it to be an ILS approach, which is Instrument Landing System. So I'm going to scroll down until that's the one selected. I'm going to click enter. I'm going to use vectors. You can have the GPS take you to certain transitions that are on the map, but they're generally pretty far away. They work really great if you're coming into an airport from 50 miles away or something. You can select one of these and let the plane fly you there and on a certain sequence down, but I'm going to just choose a more direct vectors because we're pretty close. I'm going to load the approach procedure. I'm not going to activate it yet. I could scroll the wheel up or down to activate it. Got a little lost there, so I'll start over. Procedure, select approach, scroll to 34 left, press enter, vectors, and I'm going to click enter to load it. I can go back to our flight plan, and you can see the approach is all in here. So the first place on it is Josta, which is one of our places we're going. And we'll do some shenanigans when we get a little closer to make sure that we descend properly. It looks like we're about to turn towards from LANGL to JOSTA. We'll see what that looks like on the map. Makes sense. It's not up here, it's a little bit to the right. Of course, the plane turns left first and then it turns right. Maybe that's modeling real life. I'm not a pilot. I just sit in this chair in my desk and pretend I am, which is fun. And maybe you'll find it fun too. Another feature of the map is that it can show you the approaches, and it has a long list of them, anything that's within 10 miles. And as you can see, there's 6, 7 here, 8, there's a lot of them, and all different runways and different procedures. So we're looking for KSEA 34 left ILS. This is our approach. Here's our plane. We want to follow this glide path down to the airport. And we have a ways to go yet. This isn't moving because we're actually going perpendicular to the direction. We're not going towards the airport, we're going abreast of it. And that'll be true until we get 2.1 miles to JALON, and then we'll turn. Once we're heading this way, we're going to make some changes to the GPS. We're going to toggle it to VLOC, which I looked up today because I never knew what that meant. It means VOR localizer. VOR stands for very high frequency omnidirectional range. So what VLOC actually is very high frequency omnidirectional range localizer, VLOC. It's too much. Luckily for us, our plane is making the turn to JALON, which will line us up with the airport. Once we get headed and close to this, what I think of as a funnel, a diagram of the ILS approach, we're going to toggle the autopilot back to heading. We don't want to navigate with the GPS to it. We're going to toggle the radio to stop using the GPS and use the VLOC system, and then we're going to click the approach button on the autopilot, and we're going to toggle the approach to being active. So that's just going to be a couple minutes away, and hopefully the plane will fly down to the runway as expected. I must confess I've been practicing this a little bit today and yesterday, and I'm pretty sure it's going to work. That's probably close enough, so our procedure again will be to set the heading bug to the airport, toggle off of navigation to heading, should stay about the same or go that way a little bit because I didn't center it perfectly. I'm going to change the GPS to the CDI from GPS to VLOC, and then I'm going to click the approach button on the autopilot, and then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to scroll up one notch to activate the approach, and that should be all we need to do except to control the power on our descent. We don't want to hit the runway going 170 miles an hour. So I'm going to click the mouse in this window to bring this back in here, and we'll just watch the flight. I'll toggle the map once in a while to see how we're doing. It should start descending when we get to this line, when the center of the plane gets to this line. And there we go, we're heading down. You can see the vertical speed indicator going down. I'm going to reduce power. And I'll put in one notch of flaps by pressing number 2 on my keyboard. You can see this went down. Raise the power a little bit. Maybe we want to come in at about 100 or 110 knots until we get a little closer to the runway. One of the things I found most fascinating is these 4 lights on most runways indicate that you're on the glide slope. If you are above it, the lights will be all white. If you're below the glide slope, they'll be all red. There's a saying I read somewhere that says, 4 reds, you're dead. You got to be careful you don't hit the ground before you hit the airport, of course, before you get to the runway. So those are interesting. You can fly by hand if you have a joystick or yoke and not using a mouse, and just maintain your glide slope by looking at these lights. They're very helpful. So scroll back out to our plane. We're still flying at about 110 knots, and we are descending automatically via autopilot. It's the most fascinating thing that I've seen in a long time, which is why I've been doing this for about a year when I retired, and I have about 900 hours in a little over a year of simulation flying. That means I sit at this computer desk, much to the chagrin of my wife, who's a professor at a university and works about 100 hours a week. I work 12 hours a week and fly airplanes and ride motorcycles and yell at people on the internet who don't agree with me politically. Sometimes I go outside. So if you're still with me, that's amazing, because this is extremely boring for anybody, I would imagine. And I've heard that general aviation flight is hour upon hour of painful boredom punctuated with brief moments of sheer panic. So we're going to try not to panic. I'm going to slow the plane down a little more, because at some point I'm going to have to click off the autopilot. Oh, and on this plane you do that by clicking on this red button. It's an autopilot disconnect. And we're close enough now, I'm going to add a second final notch of flaps, which will slow the plane down quite a bit. We don't want to go too slow or we will fall out of the sky. And soon I'm going to click off the autopilot and fly the plane by hand. You hear the beep, clicked in the center. I'm flying the plane. Not very well, of course. I'm optimistic. I accidentally clicked the mouse and lost control of the plane, so my optimism went way down. Letter B for brakes. Shift, letter 8. This is this view. I stopped on the runway, which I really shouldn't do. But that's the end of my tutorial. 17 minutes. Y'all are, well, maybe I paused it, so it's more than 17 minutes. That was longer than I thought. All right, thanks a lot. Leave your comments below. Positive comments are most welcome. Things I left out, things that I should have said, things that I got incorrect are fine. Negative things, telling me things I already know, like, John, you're an idiot. I already know that. Those will probably be hidden comments. But go ahead, and thanks for watching. And I'm out.